Are you pregnant or a new parent looking to ensure a better postpartum experience? Or are you a birth worker looking to improve your postpartum care skills? Check out Thriving After Birth, an online self-paced course by me, midwife and educator Tanya Tringali. It's 10.5 hours of video content featuring experts in lactation, mental health, pelvic floor health, pediatric sleep issues. You also get worksheets and a workbook, as well as options to have a one-on-one session with me. Sign up at motherwitmaternity.com/thriving, and let's improve postpartum care together.
You brought me the Chinese food for breakfast and made sure that I ate. And then you guys let yourself out, and Joe and I were just parents. I was a mom. I became a parent in that moment. And it was quiet. I was in my own home, in my own apartment. Like, it was such an amazing transition in our lives to becoming parents. I know we wouldn't have had that same experience at a hospital.
Hi, everyone. I'm your midwife, Tanya Tringali. Welcome to the Motherwit Podcast, a show about the issues that we, healthcare consumers, and providers face every day as we interact with the medical system. We'll talk about its blind spots, shortcomings, and share the strategies that we can use to feel seen and heard, no matter which side of the table we sit on. I have a special treat for you today, an out-of-hospital birth story told by both the client and her midwife. I want to share out-of-hospital birth stories with you because, well, I want to normalize this option for people. I want to destigmatize it, reduce fear. Now, why do I want to do this the way we're going to do it today, which is with both the birthing person and her midwife? I'm doing it this way because I want people to hear the voices of those who actively choose home birth, regardless of which side of the equation they are on. So, people choose home birth because it vibes with their belief system, because it feels like the best way to protect their own body. Sometimes it feels like it's the only way that their experience can be their own and not potentially sabotaged by a system that is so much larger than any one person, particularly a person as vulnerable as someone in labor. And people choose it because they believe it's what's right for their babies, for their children, for the future of humanity sometimes. Midwives who choose home birth as the place they feel most called to practice are, in my opinion, among the bravest. And I don't mean this the way I think you think I mean it. I'm not saying that they're brave for taking on such a risk or doing something so scary. That's not it at all. That's not how I feel. I mean it because they're brave enough and willing enough to fight what has long been an uphill battle. All the while, they are learning to be entrepreneurs. They have to learn how to run a business, fight with insurance companies, all kinds of things that we don't learn in midwifery school, right? So when most of us are like totally burnt out and we're like, I just need a job, there are these people that go out there and start these businesses, and I'm just forever impressed with them. Another reason that I'm doing this is because, as you may have noticed, in season 2, episode 12, the final episode of that season, we aired a home birth story of a friend of mine, Anne Semanek. And we could have used the presence of her midwife to get a fuller, clearer picture, because Anne was in the zone in that labor, which is exactly where she should have been. But therefore, she was unable to share quite as many details as I think even she had hoped. So now we're going to get the pleasure of these two telling their shared story. And I have a feeling that where one of them finds loose edges, the other will be able to pick up and help the other out. So we'll see. Anyway, in full disclosure, I know both of these people fairly well. Dory is a friend. I was actually her midwife for a day. I saw her for her first visit in her first pregnancy, and then I promptly kicked her out of my practice because she wanted something I myself couldn't give her in the particular style of practice I was working in at the time. And I knew of Martine long before she knew of me because of her great work in the community. And I eventually got to know her when we began working together as adjunct faculty at NYU. So I am nearly certain that they debriefed this birth in the days or even months that followed, but I'm also nearly certain that at this point they haven't discussed it for 3+ years now. So I'm excited to sit back and enjoy the joint telling of a home birth story by both the birthing person and her midwife, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I will. Thank you guys for joining me today. I have with me Dory, a dear friend and someone who has a great birth story to tell, a home birth story, and her midwife, Martine, who's here to contribute to the story. Because as we learned when Anne shared her story, sometimes we're like in labor land and it can be very hard to, get the details straight, for lack of a better word. Dory, do us a favor and introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Dory, and I live in Brooklyn with my husband Joe and my 2 girls, Layla and Avery, and our cat Bellatrix, who goes by Belly, who's an important part of my birth story and my relationship with Martine. I am a social worker and a therapist. I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm the youngest of 3 children myself. And yeah, I don't know. What else do you want to know?
Oh, I'll ask you great questions here in a moment. That'll do for now. Martine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Martine. I'm a midwife. I've been a midwife since 2000. I love it. It's called my name. I took that calling and haven't regretted it, and just love what I do. I worked in lots of different settings doing midwifery in all kinds of capacities, and had a home birth practice, which I had the pleasure of working with Dory and Joe. For 17 years, I did home births in New York City in the 5 boroughs and loved it.
Can you tell us also a little bit about your organization?
Okay, so I started a nonprofit, Foundation for Advancement of Haitian Midwives, in 2013 and incorporated in 2014. We really help build capacity for the midwives in Haiti and midwifery students so that they can do the amazing work that they do. So in a country of 11 million people, half of them being women, and under 400 midwives in the whole country, we really need more midwives. So to be able to have Haiti have the same ability to provide their population with midwifery care is invaluable in that midwifery model of care. So we do a lot of community outreach to the general public with education. We do a lot of work around gender-based violence. We do a lot of continuing education for the midwives. And that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. All right. So Dory, back to you. I want to ask you a few kind of lead-in questions so that we can get a sense of how you got here, right? Because again, this is uncommon still in American culture and most cultures, actually, at this point in time. So I'm kind of curious if you can tell us a little bit about what you thought about, or if you ever even thought about birth when you were young, and, if you knew what a midwife was and how you thought of that, and just ultimately like how you became knowledgeable about birth at all before you were pregnant.
Sure. Well, so growing up, I had no idea what a midwife was. I think through college and in my early 20s, I had no idea what a midwife was. And I gave birth very little thought. It always was like something you do in a hospital, and something that seemed really scary, and something that was like, I don't know if dangerous is too strong of a word, but something that like you needed to be in a hospital for because it was risky. And then my sister got pregnant. My sister is 7 years older than me, and she and her husband did a lot of research, and they were still in Arkansas at the time, and they decided to go with a home birth, and I thought they were insane. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is so dangerous. What are you thinking? How can you do this to my niece or nephew? It's so scary." But I also really wanted to be there to support my sister. At that time, I really wanted to be like a supportive person, a doula to her, because it was really special to have my first niece or nephew being born. And so I went, when I was in Little Rock with them, I watched The Business of Being Born with them and kind of got introduced to that whole idea of home birth and that, the culture around it, and still was a little bit skeptical, but they became really like strong advocates for home birth. And in Arkansas, it's really hard to find a midwife who can do a home birth. But they became really strong advocates. So I did some reading and learned about it and was like, okay, this is actually not dangerous. This is not risky. You don't have to be in a hospital. This is a good option. And then I met you, Tanya, from the gym. And that's when I really kind of learned what a midwife was and all of the different types of things that midwives do. And I remember when I finally got pregnant a couple years after knowing you, I say finally, we got pregnant very quickly. But when I finally decided that I was almost ready to have a child and got pregnant, I remember saying to you, like, oh, I don't know if I want to have a hospital birth. My sister had a home birth and it was a very, very positive experience. So I'm considering that, or, you know, maybe a birthing center. And you essentially were like, if you want to have a home birth, or if you even are considering having a home birth, you need to reach out to these people immediately because they fill up immediately. And you sent me an email with 3 people.
I believe my exact words were something like, sometimes they're booked by the time you have a positive pregnancy test.
Yeah, you definitely lit a fire. I was not sure at all. And I remember going into that first meeting with JJB Midwifery and not being sure at all. But then once I met Martine and Karen, I was like, oh, these are my people. Like, midwives and social workers are not the same, but there is a lot of overlap, and I felt really comfortable. And that is how I made my decision. Oh, no, there's another part of it, actually. I did go to the birthing center in Brooklyn for an orientation session, and I went after work, and I remember the drive there was horrible traffic, and it caused me so much anxiety just to get to the orientation, because I was like, oh, I'm going to be late. I was like, I can't risk driving to this birthing center in the middle of labor or a hospital in the middle of labor. Like, I want to stay put. I want people coming to me. I do not have the capacity to deal with that kind of traffic anxiety during labor. So that was what really sealed the deal for the home birth.
Cool. Martine, similar question for you. Midwifery education in this country is woefully inadequate when it comes to teaching midwives about home birth, right? Which is ironic, since people who think they know something about midwifery but generally don't immediately connect midwifery to home birth. They say things like, oh, you're a midwife? Does that mean you deliver babies at home? Right? When the truth is, many of us do not. In fact, most of us, in terms of the type of midwife that you and I are, do not. So how is it that you managed to come out of midwifery school with, I'm assuming, but correct me if I'm wrong, minimal to no exposure to home birth, and then end up doing it? Like, how did all of this happen for you?
Okay, so I was on that route of should I not become a midwife? So I spent a little bit of time in Maternidad La Luz in Texas to see if I really wanted to do this. But I knew I didn't want to be a CPM, and I was telling Dory, I'm a diehard New Yorker, so and I believe in being licensed where I practice. And then I went to downstate orientation once, didn't sign up, then went another time, and I guess I should do it. I'm not getting younger. So I think I went into it knowing that I wanted to do home births, and I knew what I would need to supplement what I did, what I was already exposed to, because in that time I said I was a professional labor support person before the doula epidemic came about, and everyone, got certified to be doulas. And I attended home births. I've worked in freestanding birth centers, so I kind of did the spectrum of different hospital birth centers and home. But I just knew that what helped me was also not making clinical judgments and being a support person by people's side, and also making clinical judgments, having been a nurse for so long, and just putting the two together. But I always say, but I was not a midwife. So midwifery education was valuable, but like the CM and CNM routes, they don't teach you enough about out-of-hospital birth. And you still do need an experience. So I knew when I came out, I needed to get really good hands-on experience. So I worked at a busy inner city hospital. And, saw a lot, did a lot. And then, when I felt okay, I said, this is it, because I did not sign up to do this, to work in a hospital.
Cool. Well, I'm so glad that you were called to do the work that you did for so long. All right. So, Dory, I want you to go ahead and jump into your story, and I'm going to leave it to you, like where you feel like you need to pick up, because, right, the start of labor, I think a lot of people listening who are still pregnant, maybe with their first baby, don't understand that it's not always such a clear line in the sand the way movies make it out to be. And I don't remember the details of your startup of labor, but so feel free to pick whatever place the story begins for you.
Because that's why I was curious too. If you could start with, talk a little bit about the pregnancy and what you thought you got that you were looking for versus going to a hospital birth before you even get to having the baby.
Well, so I was very spoiled because I was still going to CrossFit regularly and seeing Tanya very, very regularly. And so I had Tanya plus you, Martine, and Karen for my visits. Oh, gosh. Why did I not want a hospital birth? I think I just wanted to be treated more humanely. I wanted my visits to be meaningful. I wanted to know my providers. The idea that I would be in a practice meeting with 7 to 10 different providers and then unsure of who would be delivering just felt really stressful and really impersonal, and I didn't like that idea at all. So I was looking for a more personalized experience, and then I was really lucky. I had a very easy pregnancy, not a lot of issues. With that said, pregnancy, especially the first time, is really overwhelming. It's really scary. Any little thing that feels different, you wonder, am I supposed to feel this way, or is this a problem? So it was wonderful that I could reach out to you, Tanya, as a friend. This is before you had your official business doing what you do now. But it was also amazing to be able to reach out to you, Martine, via text, through your call line, if it was serious enough to reach out that way, and speak to the providers that I knew. It was one of the two of you, and you would answer my questions. You would calm me down. You would tell me not to Google anything. I remember when I had placenta previa, kind of, I don't even think you call it that, at the 20-week scan. I, of course, started to panic, and I remember Martine was like, do not Google this. Do not go online. Don't research this. And I listened because I followed the rules, and then I talked to both of you, and you helped me to feel like, okay, this is fine. We'll be able to navigate whatever it is.
There's so much information out there. It's really reading the right things, and I think sometimes people just read anything and then go with that, and that's what sticks in your mind. So I'm always telling people, not because I like people to read stuff and to keep me abreast of the latest research or whatnot, but when you're like, I saw this on so-and-so's blog, I'm like, I really don't want to hear it. It's like, I want to hear real stuff.
So I don't remember this at all. Like, I'm amazed at how little I remember at this point. But I'm going to guess that what you had was what's often called a low-lying placenta. Does that sound familiar? Or did they? Yeah. Because this is probably one of my biggest bugaboos in terms of where people start to reach out to me for extra support, is because providers just like throw out this piece of information. The person freaks, Googles, thinks all kinds of horrible thoughts. And the truth is, like, at 20 weeks when this is seen, it is pretty darn close to an incidental finding, and I would put nearly all my money on it that it will resolve. But this is such a chronic starting point of fear for people. You know, say somebody gets through the early part of pregnancy, their genetic testing comes out fine, everything's fine, they think they're out of that quote-unquote window of miscarriage, all those things. This is like the next most common thing that starts someone off down the anxiety path that we create as providers by not communicating clearly about this. That's such a big bugaboo of mine. So it's interesting. I don't remember this in your history.
Well, so what's interesting, I had to get sent out for labs because you guys don't do labs, obviously. And I got the results, and I think the doctor who went through the labs with me...
No, we don't do sonos. We do the labs.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. The doctor kind of explained what was happening, and I remember leaving, and I was with Joe, and I remember starting to feel that anxiety well up. And then, Martine, you called me on my way home. You called me, like, immediately, and you said, we just got these results. I wanted to talk to you about what this means. And I didn't know that I would get that kind of care from working with a small home birth midwifery practice, but I'm so grateful that I had it because I know how regular doctors' offices are. You get results through your email and then you wait hours, at least days more likely, until you actually talk to someone who knows. And so that was huge. I just can't overstate the importance of having that kind of personalized and individual attention. It was really, really helpful. So yeah, skipping ahead, I had a great educational experience from the home birth classes. Joe and I did those at home in our apartment. And so I knew that labor could be a long thing and that labor was not just, early labor at least could be a long thing. So I remember waking up in the middle of the night. Of course, this was supposed to be my last day of work. I was working right up until the very end because I'm type A and like to get everything done. So this was the Friday. The Friday was my last day of work. I woke up in the middle of the night, Thursday night into Friday morning with contractions. And I knew they were contractions. Like I had been having Braxton Hicks. I'd been having tension and I knew what that felt like. And then I knew that these felt different. So I got very, very excited and, of course, waited until maybe 6 a.m., 7 a.m. to text or call. And whoever answered, I don't remember, told me to go back to sleep, to not wake up and to not be excited and to go back to sleep, which was crazy advice, but I tried to take it. And then I was like, how can I go back to sleep? I'm in labor. But I tried to go back to sleep, and I did. I slept for a few more hours. And then I really tried to take the advice of just like resting, relaxing, not focusing on labor too much because I didn't know how long this early labor stage was going to last. So I called into work, started watching The West Wing, started binge watching a TV show, went to the grocery store to get my popsicles and my coconut water and all the things that I thought that I'd want to have at home, none of which I wanted later in labor because I didn't want anything in my body. So yeah, that Friday was really just a relaxing day of TV. As the day progressed, the contractions got more intense. They got closer together. But I remember it was probably around 6 or 7 p.m. that I was like, okay, this is starting to feel like real labor. And we called the line, and you guys listened to me actually go, like you talked to me on the phone until I had a contraction and listened to me on the phone. And I can't remember if you came right away. I think you might have come in the next couple of hours.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it was close enough to the point where you could come. And so at that point I was getting like, oh, this is happening. And I have to say, in the back of my mind this whole time, my sister had this very wonderful home birth experience. It was like 12 hours, so pretty short from the start of labor to the baby being born. And so I was kind of like, oh, I'm already at that point. I'm going to have this baby so soon. And that was not the case. So he came over, I don't know, 9, 10, a couple hours after I'd called. And I just remember immediately starting to feel like, oh my gosh, I called you too soon. I'm not going to have the baby. Like, what are we going to do here? It's late. You're going to be here all night. I remember feeling anxious almost as soon as you guys arrived because I felt like I had done the wrong thing and I'd called you too early.
And Joe kept offering us different foods. Different things from...
Are you saying he had prepared like a spread of foods to feed the midwives?
He kept like pulling things out. You want some of this? You want some of this?
Well, Joe and I both like to host parties, and so I think we kind of jumped into host mode. And so for me, I was like, "Well, this is a crappy party. There's no baby. There's no baby yet." And he was like, "Well, let me just give them food." That tracks for our relationship.
We hope you're enjoying the Mother Wit podcast. If you are, please rate us and leave a review in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to your podcast. Thanks so much. Now, back to the show.
I want to unpack 2 things that have been said here. The first is, I would love it if Martine would just speak to, because I think there's a real art to this, and midwives do it really well, and that is discerning where someone's at in labor over the telephone. In fact, I've written scenarios that I do with students at both universities that I work for, so that students can, and I act them out myself, just for the record, like a bunch of us do this, and we like really give them the experience of having to figure out what decisions to make based on the way somebody's presenting on the phone in labor. So I think this is a really interesting thing for Martine to talk a little bit about. And then the next thing, just so I don't forget, is Dory, I want to hear a little bit more about this anxiety that you felt about having called too early, because I suspect a lot of people are thinking and feeling these thoughts, and I have some thoughts about it myself. So, Martine.
I think the number one thing that comes to mind is the relationship you have with somebody, and just knowing who they are and how you can approach their labor. So when is it time to call or when is it time to come is variable. So, I know there's all these childbirth ed things, 511, the 311, the what. I'm like, it's a human having a baby. So let's pay attention to what she's actually doing or saying. So sometimes if a partner answers and the laboring person can't get on the phone and talk, sometimes that's a sign that you should maybe come, or sometimes it's a sign that you should come, not because so much that they're in active labor, but they really want you to come, so they're really trying not to let you know that they're early on in labor. So having the partner be next to them, so at least you can hear what's going on, is helpful, or actually talking to the person and seeing what's going on. So it's kind of figuring out. So I always said it's never wrong to call, and it's never too early to be there. Is what the person needed, and some people need some people won't. There's always the watch pot won't boil, and there's the other side of it. It won't start boiling if you don't watch it. So some people need to feel that safety, that everybody's there. You found parking, everything's good, and they're in the house, and they'll take off. So it really depends. And then I've had people that sound really active and tell me, don't come, and you know better than not. I've had some been parked in front of people's houses, and then when they decide, well, maybe you should come over now, it's like, okay, I'm downstairs. It's like, how did you know? It's like, well,
Yeah.
So it's the relationship. So it's there's no right or wrong to it. It takes what time it takes. So, I always said it balances itself off. The bim bam, thank you, ma'am. You got there, the baby flew out before you got there. And then the one that you lived with them for 2 days. It is what it is,
Yep.
And then sometimes
awesome.
too, we had a client's husband that just wrote a really nice story about his experience becoming a parent. But he said, Martine left. She had other things to do. I thought that was hilarious. She was really in really super early labor. So I went and did my other visits in the neighborhood. But of course you have your ears pierced and you're ready to come back in a heartbeat. And, she needed to, that little time to just kind of rest and turn the corner to come back. So it's really just really paying attention and building that relationship and that trust between each other is really invaluable.
That was a fantastic article, and we will link it in the show notes because I think it's a great read for our listeners. Okay, so Dory, I don't want to belabor it too much, but I want you to tell me a little bit more about the roots of that feeling of anxiety, because it reminds me a little bit of, and I don't know if it's just kind of like an outgrowth of what it would have been like if you'd been in a hospital-based setting with a big practice. But, I see all the time clients that are so resistant or reluctant to call and bother their provider. And I almost feel like, oh, this is the home birth version of that. But I don't know if that's the root of it or not.
Yeah, I don't know that it was like, I didn't feel like I was, did I feel? Maybe. I just didn't know. I guess it is, actually, probably. I don't want people to have to stay up all night if I'm not going to have a baby until, the next day. I want everyone to get rest. And so I think there was part of that of like needing to perform, like, oh, it's my job to have the baby now, and I'm not having the baby yet. And I think that watched pot never boils analogy really felt true. I think I felt like pressure even though I wanted you to be there, and I called obviously because I wanted you to be there. I think I did feel pressure once you were there. I was like, okay, well, it's time. And then it felt like everything slowed down. Because that whole day I felt like it was progressing and it was going and it was getting stronger and faster. And then I remember you guys came and then I was like, oh, my contractions they're not happening as frequently. Like, why are they not happening?
I think we focus so much on I'm saying this very loosely with quotation marks, the product, that baby coming out versus the process. And I already said you work with us for the process and the product of that process. And I think people are just so focused on the baby's not coming out, but you needed somebody to make sure you were hydrated. You needed someone to make sure your blood pressure stayed okay. You need somebody for all those other parts too, that we just focus on having the baby. So it's not that we were there too long, we're there the right amount of time to make sure that you and your baby are safe.
Yeah. Well, and as listeners can hear, just from speaking to Martine, she's so calming and so supportive and so just like, oh, I'm here for the right amount of time. And that was so important that night. And then the whole process of working with you. But that was really helpful when I was kind of spinning out later that evening. So I think it was around 3 a.m. at this point. And contractions had kind of slowed when you guys first arrived. From my perspective, I have no idea what actually happened. You encouraged me to get back in bed with Joe, who was napping, so I did that for a little bit, and I did. I felt really sad. I was like, oh, we were going, and now it's slowed down. And I know that there was vomit at some point related to this, but I was in the bathroom. I think I had just vomited, taken a shower, and I remember I was like sitting in the bathroom, laboring on the toilet, which is so glamorous. Everyone has that mental image now. But I remember feeling just so disheartened, and Martine coming in and talking to me and just saying, like, this takes time. This is a process. There's no right or wrong. I vaguely remember being like, you know what, I'm so tired. Like, maybe I should just go to a hospital. Maybe I don't want to do this home birth thing. And I'm like getting emotional just thinking about it. And Martine was so supportive. She was like, well, of course, if that's what you want to do, we can do that. That's always an option for you. But also, like, this is a process. It takes time. Maybe you can rest a little bit more, see what happens, see how you feel in the next hour or so. And just like a little bit of encouragement to hang in there for, another hour. And your pep talk was really helpful. And I don't remember exactly what happened next. But it was around 4:00 that I started pushing. And I don't remember if you checked me first or if I have no idea. Do you remember anything about why I started pushing? Right. Finally.
You were bearing down a little bit. And then after a while, I just made sure that you had no cervix left. That you were completely dilated.
Yeah. So I don't remember that. But I can imagine that when you told me that, I was very happy. And it was like, oh, it's happening. We can do this. And got energy again. And then I started pushing. And that was a really, really long time of pushing. I pushed for 4 hours. I also reviewed the notes because I printed them out for the baby book. And I remember just like, oh my gosh. I remember you guys encouraged me after the first push. You're like, oh, you're doing really good at this. You're very in touch with your body. You're pushing, like, I don't know, the right way. So I felt all proud. And I was like, oh, that means it's going to happen quickly. And then I just pushed every 4 minutes for 4 hours. And I kind of was doing it in my sleep a little bit. I was pushing and then falling asleep in between contractions, and then pushing and then falling asleep. And then there was like something happened in my body. I don't know what happened. Martine has described it to me since then as like a pop. I just felt like I was woken up suddenly by some sharp sensation. Joe was in the other room. He was making himself Chinese food for breakfast. This is like 4 a.m. And I remember Martine yelling out, Joe, you're going to miss it. And so after 4 hours of pushing, suddenly, like, we're back in action. I'm wide awake. Joe's rushing back into the bedroom. And I guess do you want to speak, Martine, to what happened in that moment when you heard that pop?
It was a real pop in her pelvis that you just heard, this real detachment. And I also, in the back of my head, was thinking, because when we started working together, I was like, oh, she's Tanya's friend, another bodybuilder chick. Oh, boy. I said super fit and everything tight. I said super firm from everything. So it was just really a relaxation of letting go in your pelvis, which, really did make an alarming sound, I have to say, that I was, kind of worried about you being able to, move your legs and maneuver your pelvis afterwards.
Yeah, I would have been worried that was her pubic symphysis.
Yeah.
And there was no ramification from this after the fact? Like, Dory, you don't have any awareness of what exact place in your pelvis made the pop?
No idea.
Fascinating.
No idea. And I was able to move fine afterwards. Yeah, I was like, my mother-in-law always comments on it because she came over a few hours later and she's like, you were running around, sitting with your legs crossed on the couch, like offering us coffee. I was totally fine after the birth. But I have a video of the birth. I just watched it, actually, before this call to refresh my memory. I pushed a few more times. The baby started to crown. Martine told me her mantra, "Thou shalt not tear," and did not allow me to push when the baby's head started to come out, which I was really unhappy about. But I took some deep breaths.
Let's rephrase that. We had you push gently so the baby can birth gently and everything can stretch and move out of your kid's way.
Yeah. So I was trying to relax, which is so difficult to do when you feel so much pressure and so much pain, but I did. I relaxed. And then the baby came out. And then I was a mother. And I was crying, and Joe was crying. And we didn't know the sex of the baby for quite some time, for several minutes. But she ended up being a girl. As so far, that's what we assume based on what she's assigned at birth. And she was awesome. She was turning her head. She was, crying out like a little baby dinosaur here and there. But it was just an amazing moment. It was an amazing moment. And if you guys were worried about anything, it didn't register with me. I just was so in awe and in love with that baby and just weeping.
It was beautiful. Thank you for allowing me into your space and your family.
Yeah. I think the last thing that I like to share about this home birth experience, it was that part was so peaceful. Like, I was a mom. I became a parent in that moment. And it was quiet I was in my own home, in my own apartment. Of course, we then delivered the placenta and we had that quiet hour. I have no idea where you were, Martine, but we were in the bedroom. I assume you were cleaning up. I don't know. Watching TV. I don't know. Doing notes. But it was so peaceful. And then you brought me a smoothie or something, eggs. I don't know. Oh, no, it was the Chinese food. You brought me the Chinese food for breakfast and made sure that I ate. And then you guys let yourself out. And Joe and I were just parents. And it was so amazing to have this it was just such a peaceful experience. And it was terrifying because we took a nap with the baby on Joe's chest because he told us to sleep. That was going to be a long stretch of sleep for the baby. So we were alone at home. And then after several hours, Avery just woke up crying. And Joe and I looked at each other. We're like, oh, there's no one else here. This is our life now. Which was overwhelming, but also so beautiful. Like, it was such an amazing transition in our lives to becoming parents. And I know we wouldn't have had that same experience at a hospital.
So something else, I don't know if you remember, this is Iris and Martine's famous question. So I always ask people right after the birth, while we're doing a newborn exam or before we leave, and then I ask our postpartum visit and then at our 6-week visit, because your answers tend to change. But in your ideal pregnancy, labor, and birth, what would you do the same? What would you have done differently? And I always just love hearing people process, like immediately after, you and your partner, talking about your experience of what would you do the same, what would you do different in pregnancy, labor, and birth, and then how that shifts at 6 weeks versus, once you've been on the job mothering for a while of what your thoughts were.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because it's almost 4 years later. So I'm like, oh, I wouldn't change anything. All of the things that I probably was really stressed out about then have kind of fallen away. Um, I don't know. I can't think of anything that I would change. It was hard. It was a long time. I guess the only thing that I would have liked to have not compared myself so much to my sister because I had that expectation of this is going to be pretty fast. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be quick. And that really got me in my head. So as I passed that 12-hour mark or whatever it is, I was like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. This is bad. This is wrong. Which, of course, is not true. But if I had not had that expectation, it would have been different.
Right. In life, I think we always put our markers. We have to compare it to something, to know that something is okay or not okay. So you have to kind of put those comparisons. So you've had someone that she said she wanted to have like 10 babies. I think it was baby number 9 or something. And through the whole pregnancy, this never happens, this never happens, this never happens. The whole birth, this never happens, this never happens. I was like, well, you wanted 10. When you have all 10, you can tell me what usually happens and what doesn't. Because she was like, because you can't compare, and even you having 2 children, you can't compare the 2 births and pregnancies at all. It's the first lesson of don't compare your children. Because they're really different beings and different experiences to have them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Dory, one final set of questions for you is really just to unpack a couple details of the postpartum. I know we need to wrap up, and so I don't want to belabor it too much, and we talk about postpartum all the time on this podcast. So, any comments about breastfeeding? Like, what was that first latch like? How involved was Martine? How much help did you feel like you needed? And then also, if you could just touch on anything that happened with your mood in the postpartum period.
Yeah, I was really fortunate with breastfeeding. Martine did help me to get Avery latched for that first time, and she latched pretty well. And I didn't really have any issues. Early on in breastfeeding, you just don't know if you're doing it right. You don't know if the baby is latching on. But so that first day she was really involved. And then she came for that immediate postpartum visit. I guess it was the same day, maybe the next day, and checked in on it and made sure that she was eating. And then followed up by phone a lot just to ask how are things going. And I didn't have any issues. She recommended a lactation consultant if I needed it. But I really didn't have any issues with the latch. I'm sure I reached out to you, Tanya. I can't quite remember because it hurts. It wasn't, never toe curling pain. I can't remember who used that expression to make sure that, it was you. It was never toe curling pain, but it hurts and your nipples are very sensitive during that time. But I was very lucky. We didn't have issues. And then my mood, I think I was pretty lucky in terms of how I made that transition and how my hormones responded to becoming a parent. I had more serious anxiety after my second daughter was born. I didn't see a therapist to diagnose with PPA, but I felt pretty good after Avery with that with my first birth and postpartum experience. And I just felt so supported.
Did you feel you had great postpartum support the first and second time?
Yeah. The first time I felt extremely supported. I had Martine, I had Tanya, I took time off work. And I had 3 other very close friends that I met during pregnancy. And so we were together a lot during that postpartum period. And that was life-changing to have people who are in the exact same stage of motherhood. We were going through it at the exact same time. I didn't have a lot of close friends from before being a parent who were parents at that time or pregnant at that time. So I was very intentional about making friends during pregnancy, which was a very great thing to do, a decision I'm happy with. I'm still very good friends with them today. The second time was harder. It was COVID. I had Layla August 2020. I was very grateful that I was already signed up for a home birth. I will say that because a lot of my friends kind of wanted last minute home births, which is problematic for a number of reasons. But so yeah, I had much more support the first time around. And I think that was kind of vital to coping with any of the mood stuff and the identity shift that happens at that time.
Martine, is there anything else that you want to add with all this hindsight?
Yeah, I can't think of anything right off the bat, but it was my pleasure. As you know, doing this work, just you get to meet such wonderful people that you would never really meet every day, and met real New Yorkers doing home births in the 5 boroughs. So I feel blessed to be part of Dory's story and Joe's.
Wait, I know where we have been remiss. You started out telling us that the cat is an integral part of your story.
Don't get me started with that cat.
Well, the funny thing is, apparently Martine and I equally hate cats. So Dory, what's the story with the cat?
The home birth thing. So I'm the dog person. Karen's a cat person. So whenever we go to people's homes, the cats always come to me and the dogs will always go to Karen.
So I have a cat who is very friendly. I always joke that she will go to the newest person in the room. She just wants love from everyone. So she will sit on the newest person's lap until they love her. And we also were...
She's persistent.
She was very persistent. We also lived in a very small 2-bedroom apartment at the time. So I'm laboring in one room. The cat didn't want to be near me because I was probably freaking her out. So she only had limited options, and so she was on Martine essentially the entire time I was laboring, which I had very little awareness of in the moment, but I saw a Facebook post about it later on, how upset Martine was that my cat was glued to her lap.
Shauna posted that. I was like, you're going to appreciate this after. We were just laughing, and everyone's like, oh, I didn't know how you felt. I was like, is this a deal breaker that I don't really like cats? Tolerate them? I've woken up with cats all around me, if you take a nod off on the couch. Yeah.
That is
it's all
so
part
funny.
Of your story.
Oh my goodness. I love it. All right, guys, I'm glad we ended on the cat note. Thank you so much for taking the time today to share your story. And Dory, I hope that this audio record of you telling your birth story, is it 4 years later? Is that
Almost.
where we're at in
October, it will be 4 years.
Almost
Yep.
4 years. Yeah, so I hope that this serves a great purpose in you and Avery and your whole family's life moving forward.
Yes, thank you. I'm so grateful to have this experience and to reprocess the memory with Martine so many years later. It's really special. So thank you for setting it up.
Midwife for life. When you send them off to school, you're having a good cry, you're sending them to college, just give a holler.
Oh.
We're always here for you.
I definitely will.
And a gentle reminder that nothing we discuss on this show should ever be considered medical advice. Please speak to your local provider about anything that comes up in this show that resonates with you and your needs and your health care. Hey everyone, it's me, Tanya, your host here at the Mother Wit Podcast. You know I sometimes invite my clients on the show to talk about their birth stories and postpartum experiences, but I want to tell you a little bit more about what those clients and I actually do together. I started MotherWit to help people in the perinatal period achieve their health and wellness goals. That means whether you're hoping to conceive and struggling with high blood pressure or high blood sugar, or you're having trouble managing anxiety or depression in the postpartum period, or maybe you just need support and advocacy between prenatal or postpartum visits, I can help. Get a discount on your first consultation with me at motherwitmaternity.com using the code FIRSTCONSULT 10% off. That's 10% symbol, all one word. I'm looking forward to working with you and maybe having you on the show too.